Hello and welcome back to the Cosmic Enigma. Here we share real-life experiences of encounters with the unknown, stories that come from beyond the stars, crafted to help you relax and drift off to sleep. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I love seeing just how far this mystery reaches. Now find a comfortable spot, take a deep breath, and let yourself be carried away. Story 1. The floorboard under my foot didn't groan this time. With each step I moved forward, expecting the comforting protest of wood, but it remained silent, unnaturally smooth. The hallway, usually resonant with the rustle of air, stood still, its atmosphere thick and unmoving. A light switch offered no click or glow, leaving shadows to gather in corners like uninvited guests. My hand brushed the wall, searching for familiar imperfections, yet the surface felt unyielding and foreign. Standing alone, I listened for the hum of the old fridge, the whisper of its mechanics, but only encountered an unsettling void. My fingers hesitated over the cold doorknob, uncertain if the chill was from the night or a subtle warning. This has been my reality for weeks now. Sleep comes in fragments, if at all. I find myself standing in doorways at strange hours, listening to sounds that shouldn't exist. The walls of my home seem to pulse with a rhythm I can't identify, like a heartbeat echoing through the structure itself. Electronic devices turn themselves on without explanation. The television flickers to life, displaying static patterns that hurt to look at directly. My phone buzzes with messages that contain only empty spaces, notifications from numbers that don't exist. The neighbors avoid eye contact when I try to explain. They nod politely, their faces wearing expressions of practiced concern mixed with something else. Fear perhaps, or disbelief. I've stopped trying to convince anyone. The marks on my arms have faded to pale lines that only I seem to notice. The doctor found nothing unusual in my blood work, nothing to explain the metallic taste that lingers on my tongue or the way my skin sometimes feels like it's vibrating from within. Every night I check the locks 3 times, not because I fear someone breaking in, but because I need to confirm the doors will keep me inside. There's an urge growing stronger to walk outside and look up at the sky, to wait, to watch. I resist this compulsion by gripping the doorframe until my knuckles turn white, feeling the wood grain beneath my fingers like an anchor to this world. The dreams, when they come, are always the same. I'm standing in an open field, surrounded by absolute silence. Above me, something moves against the stars, blocking them out one by one until darkness swallows everything. I wake with the sensation of falling, my body rigid with a cold that seems to come from my bones rather than the air around me. But these are just the consequences, the aftermath of something I'm still trying to piece together. The memory comes in waves, fragments that don't quite connect, like trying to recall a conversation heard underwater. I know something happened, something that changed the way light bends around corners in my house, the way shadows seem to lean toward me when I'm not looking directly at them. I remember being watched, not by human eyes, but by something patient and calculating. The feeling would wash over me suddenly, usually when I was alone, a certainty that I was being observed and studied. My skin would prickle with awareness, every nerve ending alert to a presence that remained just beyond perception. I would turn, scanning empty rooms, seeing nothing but furniture and walls, yet the sensation persisted like a weight pressing against my consciousness. The air itself felt different during those moments, thicker somehow, charged with an energy that made my teeth ache and my vision blur at the edges. Colors appeared more vivid, yet somehow wrong, as if the spectrum of light had shifted slightly, revealing hues that had no names. I would blink hard, trying to reset my perception, but the wrongness lingered like an afterimage burned into my retinas. There were sounds too, not quite mechanical, not quite organic. A low thrumming that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere felt more than heard. It would start as a barely perceptible vibration in my chest, then grow until it filled my entire body, making my bones resonate like tuning forks. During these episodes, electronic devices would malfunction. Radios would produce static filled with patterns that almost resembled voices speaking in reverse. Digital clocks would display impossible times, their numbers shifting and rearranging themselves when I wasn't looking directly at them. The phenomenon always occurred in the same location, a clearing I had discovered during my walks, surrounded by trees that grew in perfect circles, their branches intertwining overhead to form a natural cathedral. The ground there felt different beneath my feet, softer yet more solid, as if the earth itself was somehow more concentrated, more real than anywhere else. Grass grew in spiraling patterns that hurt to follow with my eyes, creating optical illusions that made the space seem larger from the inside than it appeared from the perimeter. I would find myself drawn to this place repeatedly, often without conscious decision. I would begin walking with some mundane destination in mind, only to realize I had somehow changed course and ended up standing at the edge of the clearing, staring into its center where the grass formed a perfect circle of darker green. The air there always smelled of ozone and copper, with an underlying sweetness that reminded me of flowers I couldn't identify. Time moved strangely in that space. I would arrive thinking I had only been walking for a few minutes, only to discover hours had passed without my awareness. The sun would be in a completely different position, casting shadows that fell in directions that seemed geometrically impossible. My watch would have stopped, its hands frozen at positions that made no sense, sometimes pointing to numbers that didn't exist on its face. But even this central strangeness had a beginning, earlier signs I had dismissed or rationalized away. The first indication something was wrong came in the form of subtle wrongness that accumulated over days. Objects in my peripheral vision would appear to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. Books on shelves would be arranged differently than I remembered, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly what had changed. Photographs would seem slightly off, as if the people in them were standing in positions that were almost but not quite how I recalled them being. Food began to taste different, not spoiled or contaminated, but somehow muted, as if flavor itself was being filtered through something that dampened its intensity. Water felt thicker in my mouth, requiring more effort to swallow. My reflection in mirrors appeared delayed, taking a fraction of a second longer to mimic my movements, creating a subtle disconnect that made me question my own perception. Sleep became elusive, not because of noise or discomfort, but due to a persistent feeling that something was incomplete, unfinished. I would lie in bed with my eyes closed, aware of every sound in the house, cataloging each creak and settling noise, waiting for something that never came. The darkness behind my eyelids seemed too deep, too absolute, as if I was staring into a void that stared back with patient interest. Electronic devices began to exhibit strange behaviors. The television would change channels by itself, always landing on stations that broadcast nothing but static patterns that seemed to move with purpose. My computer would open programs I had never installed, displaying screens filled with symbols that resembled no language I recognized, yet somehow felt familiar, as if I had seen them in dreams I couldn't quite remember. The temperature in certain rooms would fluctuate without explanation. I would walk from one space to another and feel a sudden chill that had nothing to do with ventilation or weather. These cold spots seemed to move, following me from room to room, always staying just behind my left shoulder where I couldn't see them directly. When I would turn to investigate, the temperature would immediately return to normal, leaving only the memory of that inexplicable cold. Going further back, I can trace the very first anomaly to a moment so subtle I almost missed it entirely. I was sitting quietly, engaged in some routine activity I can no longer recall, when I became aware of a vibration. Not in the air or through the ground, but somehow through the fabric of space itself, as if reality was being gently plucked like a guitar string. The sensation lasted only seconds, barely long enough to register consciously, but it left me with an inexplicable sense of anticipation, as if something significant was about to begin. The smell came first, actually. A metallic scent mixed with something organic and unfamiliar, like copper pennies left in rich soil. It would appear suddenly, usually when I was distracted or focused on something else, then fade just as quickly when I tried to identify its source. I found myself sniffing the air like an animal, turning my head to catch traces of this elusive odor that seemed to exist just at the threshold of perception. My hands would sometimes tingle without cause, a pins and needles sensation that felt like mild electrical current running through my fingers. When this happened, touching metal objects would produce small sparks, nothing painful but definitely present. Light bulbs would flicker when I walked beneath them, and electronic devices would respond to my presence even when I wasn't touching them directly. There was also a quality to the light that I struggled to describe. Natural illumination seemed somehow insufficient, as if the sun itself was operating at reduced capacity. Shadows appeared darker and more defined, with edges so sharp they seemed to cut into the spaces they occupied. Colors became muted during the day, but strangely vivid after sunset, as if the absence of sunlight allowed some other form of illumination to become visible. But before any of this strangeness began, there was a period of perfect normalcy that now seems almost dreamlike in its simplicity. The day had been unremarkable in every way, filled with routine activities and mundane concerns. I had walked the same paths I always walked, seen the same familiar sights, spoken to the same people about the same inconsequential topics that fill ordinary conversation. The evening had been particularly peaceful. A gentle breeze moved through the trees, carrying the scent of grass and earth, completely natural and comforting. Birds called to each other in the distance, their songs following predictable patterns that spoke of territories being claimed and defended, mates being courted, young being fed. Everything was exactly as it should be, following laws and rhythms that had governed this place for countless years. I remember standing at the edge of what would later become that strange clearing, though at the time it appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary space between trees. The grass grew normally, without pattern or purpose beyond the simple biological imperative to reach towards sunlight. The air smelled of nothing more exotic than pollen and the faint musk of small animals that had passed through earlier in the day. The silence was complete but natural, the kind of quiet that comes when wind stills and creatures pause in their activities, creating a moment of perfect equilibrium. I breathed deeply, feeling grateful for this simple peace, unaware that I was standing at the exact center of what would soon become something else entirely. The ground beneath my feet felt solid and unremarkable, just earth and root and stone arranged according to principles I understood without question. Above me the sky stretched clear and blue, unmarked by anything more unusual than clouds that drifted in formations dictated by atmospheric pressure and wind patterns. The sun tracked its predictable course, casting shadows that fell where physics demanded they fall, creating no mysteries or impossibilities. Everything was exactly as it appeared to be, operating according to rules that had never been questioned because they had never given reason for doubt. I had no way of knowing that this moment of perfect, ordinary reality was about to end, that forces beyond my understanding were already beginning to focus their attention on this quiet place where I stood in complete innocence. The change, when it came, would be so gradual and so subtle that by the time I recognized it for what it was, there would be no returning to this simple clarity, this blessed ignorance of what waits in the spaces between the stars, watching with patience that spans eons, waiting for the precise moment to make contact with minds capable of surviving the knowledge that we are not alone, and that being alone might have been the greater mercy. Story 2. I told them the room was empty when I arrived, that the door had been ajar, swinging gently in the breeze. They paused, took notes, moved on, but the faint indentation on the sofa, still warm to the touch, suggested otherwise. The air carried a trace of lavender, too fresh to be from hours past. Light filtered through the dusty blinds, casting tangled shadows that seemed to twitch with life. The walls, lined with worn paper, absorbed sound yet whispered secrets in return. I didn't mention the overturned frame, its glass cracked like a spider's web, but the shoe print on the carpet didn't belong to me. That was 3 weeks ago, or maybe 4. The days blend together now, each one carrying the same weight of something missing, something deliberately carved out from the center of my thoughts. I wake up with the taste of copper in my mouth and my hands trembling for reasons I can't name. There's a gap where memory should be, clean-edged like a surgical cut. I know something happened that night. My body remembers what my mind refuses to hold. The way my shoulders tense when I pass certain doorways. How I flinch at the sound of static from old radios. The inexplicable bruise on my left wrist, faded now to a sickly yellow, shaped like fingers that were too long. I've been trying to piece it together, collecting fragments like broken glass. Each shard reflects something different, something wrong. The harder I focus, the more the edges blur, as if my own thoughts are working against me. The first clue came from my phone. I was scrolling through old files when I found an audio recording I didn't remember making. The timestamp showed it was created that night, but the file name was just a string of random characters. When I pressed play, the sound that emerged made my skin crawl. Static, but not the usual white noise of poor reception. This was organic, breathing, alive. Underneath it, barely audible, was my own voice. I was whispering something, the words too distorted to understand, but the tone was wrong, too calm, too accepting of whatever was happening around me. In the background there were other sounds, footsteps that didn't match any rhythm I knew, a low humming that seemed to come from multiple sources at once, and then just before the recording cut off, something that might have been laughter or sobbing. The distinction felt meaningless. Listening to it triggered the first flash of memory. I was standing in that room again, but the furniture was different, rearranged in a pattern that hurt to look at directly. The sofa where I'd found the warm indentation was pushed against the far wall, and in the center of the space was something that shouldn't have been there. A chair maybe, or a table. The shape kept shifting in my mind's eye, refusing to hold still long enough for me to understand what I was seeing. There were lights, not electric lights, but something that pulsed and flickered like dying stars. They moved around the room in patterns that made my eyes water, casting shadows that fell upward instead of down. I remember reaching out to touch one of these lights, and the sensation of my hand passing through something that felt like warm honey mixed with television static. The memory fragmented there, dissolving back into the familiar emptiness, but it left behind a certainty that chilled me. I hadn't been alone in that room. I found the second piece in my jacket pocket, a small object smooth and warm like river stone, but with edges that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at it. I don't remember picking it up, don't remember putting it in my pocket, but there it was, vibrating slightly against my palm with an irregular pulse that reminded me of a heartbeat running too fast. Holding it brought another flash. I was sitting in that impossible chair in the center of the room, my hands resting on my knees perfectly still. Around me, figures moved in the dancing light, not people. The proportions were wrong, the way they bent and flowed like water given temporary form. They were examining me, I think, or maybe examining something inside me. One of them leaned close, and I caught a scent that I can only describe as new plastic mixed with cold blood. It reached out with something that might have been a hand, and when it touched my forehead, I felt a sensation like ice water being poured directly into my brain. The memory of that touch still makes me nauseous. But here's the thing that disturbs me most. In that fragment of memory, I wasn't afraid. I was curious, even eager, as if some part of me wanted whatever was happening to continue. That version of myself felt like a stranger wearing my face. The investigation became an obsession. I started documenting everything, recording voice memos throughout the day, taking photographs of shadows that looked wrong, collecting objects that felt significant for reasons I couldn't explain. My apartment filled with evidence of something I couldn't name. That's when the present started to fracture. It began with my reflection. I was brushing my teeth when I noticed that the person in the mirror was moving just slightly out of sync with my actions. A delay of maybe half a second, but enough to make my stomach drop. I stopped moving, and for a moment my reflection continued brushing its teeth. Then it stopped too, and smiled at me with an expression I'd never worn. The sounds came next, whispers in empty rooms, always just at the edge of hearing. The same organic static from the recording, seeping through the walls like moisture. I started sleeping with earplugs, but the sounds seemed to come from inside my head instead. My neighbors began to look at me strangely, not with concern, but with a kind of recognition that made no sense, as if they knew something about me that I didn't know about myself. The woman from the apartment below started leaving small objects outside my door. Smooth stones, twisted pieces of metal, things that hummed softly when I picked them up. I found more recordings on my phone, dozens of them, all created during gaps in my memory I hadn't even noticed. In one, I was having a conversation with someone whose voice sounded like wind through broken glass. I was laughing, agreeing to something, making plans I couldn't understand. Another recording captured me singing a song I'd never heard before, in a language that didn't exist, but somehow I knew all the words. The most disturbing fragment came when I was sorting through old photographs. Hidden among pictures of family gatherings and vacation trips was an image I didn't remember taking. It showed the room from that night, but the perspective was wrong. The camera was positioned too high, as if I'd been floating near the ceiling when I took the shot. In the center of the frame was the chair, and sitting in it was a figure I recognized as myself. But this version of me was different. The posture was too straight, the expression too serene, and the eyes. My eyes were reflecting light like an animal's, bright and unnatural in the camera flash. Standing around the chair were the figures from my fragmented memories, clearer now but somehow more impossible. They had faces that were almost human, but the features were arranged in combinations that shouldn't work. Too many angles, proportions that violated basic geometry. One of them had its hand on my shoulder, and I could see that my photographed self was leaning into the touch like a cat seeking affection. Looking at that image triggered the clearest memory yet. I was back in the chair, but this time I could hear what they were saying to me. Not words exactly, but concepts that bypassed language and planted themselves directly in my understanding. They were explaining something about boundaries, about the spaces between what is and what could be, about how consciousness was more flexible than most people believed. They showed me things, visions of other rooms like this one, scattered across the world, each containing someone like me. People who had been selected for their particular type of awareness, their ability to hold contradictory truths without breaking. We were part of something larger, they explained, a network of observers, witnesses to the slow transformation of reality itself. The process was simple, they said, a small adjustment to memory, a gentle rewiring of perception. Most subjects never even noticed the change. They went back to their lives carrying new awareness like a seed, waiting for the right conditions to bloom. But sometimes, they admitted, subjects proved more resistant than expected. Sometimes the modifications didn't take properly, leaving behind fragments and inconsistencies. Subjects who remembered just enough to become curious, to start investigating, to piece together what had been carefully taken apart. Subjects like me. As this memory crystallized, I felt something shift in my apartment. The air grew thicker, charged with the same energy I remembered from that room. The objects I'd been collecting began to vibrate in harmony, creating a low chord that seemed to resonate in my bones. I looked around and realized that my investigation had been guided from the beginning. Every clue I'd found, every fragment I'd recovered, had been deliberately placed for me to discover. The audio recordings, the photographs, even the small objects appearing outside my door, they weren't evidence of what had happened to me. They were preparation for what was happening now. The walls of my apartment began to shift, the familiar angles becoming fluid and strange. The furniture rearranged itself while I watched, moving into the same impossible pattern I remembered from that night. In the center of the room, a chair materialized. Not my chair, but the chair, the one I'd been sitting in when they made their adjustments. I should have been terrified. Any rational person would have run, would have screamed, would have fought against what was clearly happening. But instead, I felt that same curious calm descending over me, the same eager acceptance that had disturbed me in the memories. Because I was beginning to understand that the modifications had worked perfectly. The investigation, the fragments, the growing unease, all of it was part of the process. They hadn't failed to erase my memories properly. They had left me with just enough awareness to lead me back to them when the time was right. The figures began to emerge from the shifting walls, their impossible faces wearing expressions that might have been affection or hunger. The distinction felt less important than it should have. One of them approached, extending that familiar not quite hand toward my forehead. This time I knew what the touch would bring. Not ice water, but warm honey. Not erasure, but expansion. Not an ending, but a beginning I'd been walking toward since the moment I'd first stepped into that empty room. I settled into the chair and closed my eyes, feeling the last of my resistance dissolve like sugar in rain. Around me, the organic static grew louder, more complex, until it resolved into something that might have been music, or instructions, or both. The touch came gentle and inevitable, and I felt my awareness bloom outward like ink in water. I could sense the other rooms now, the other subjects, all of us connected by threads of modified consciousness, a network of witnesses just as they had promised. But witnesses to what? The question formed in my mind just as the transformation completed, and in that final moment of individual thought, I realized that some questions are their own answers. Some investigations are designed never to end, only to lead deeper into territories that have no maps. I opened my eyes, and the face looking back at me from my reflection was still mine, but the expression was different now. Serene, patient, waiting. Because the room may have been empty when I arrived, but it was never empty when I left. And somewhere in another apartment in another city, Someone else is finding audio recordings they don't remember making. Someone else is discovering photographs that shouldn't exist. Someone else is beginning to investigate the fragments of an experience they can almost, but not quite, recall. The network grows, one curious mind at a time. The door is ajar, swinging gently in the breeze. Who will be next to step inside? Story 3. The surface beneath me was strangely soft yet unyielding, like standing on a whisper. An amber glow seeped from the walls, but there were no lights, just an even ambient hue that felt like the inside of my eyelids. My fingers tingled with a subtle rhythmic vibration, synced to a pulse that wasn't my own. No breeze, yet the air shifted, carrying whispers that circled me. My senses stretched thin, pulled by the absence of sound. I couldn't tell if the shiver down my spine was from within, or if something unseen had brushed against me. The humming came first, always the humming. It starts low, below my hearing, more felt than heard. My teeth ache with it. The metallic taste floods my mouth without warning, copper pennies dissolving on my tongue. Sometimes I smell ozone, sharp and clean like the moment before lightning strikes, but there's no storm, never a storm, just that persistent electrical smell that clings to my clothes, my hair, my skin. I scrub and scrub, but it lingers for days afterward. The humming builds until my bones vibrate with it, until I can't tell where the sound ends and I begin. Someone watches me sleep. I know this the way you know you're falling in a dream, that sudden certainty that jolts through your chest. My eyes snap open to darkness, but the feeling remains, heavy as a hand on my shoulder. The air moves wrong, disturbed by presence. Breathing that isn't mine echoes in the room, or maybe it's just the sound of my own breath reflected back strangely. The shadows seem denser in one corner, gathered like smoke. I lie perfectly still, counting heartbeats that might not all be mine. When morning comes, I find the carpet compressed in places where no one should have stood. My thoughts scatter like startled birds. I reach for a word and find static instead. The grocery list dissolves mid-sentence, replaced by numbers that mean nothing, coordinates to nowhere. My handwriting changes, becomes angular, foreign. I stare at these marks I've made and don't recognize them as mine. The pen feels wrong in my fingers, too heavy, too cold. My reflection in the bathroom mirror seems delayed, a half second behind my movements. I raise my hand and watch myself raise it a moment later, like looking at someone learning to copy me. Light fractures through the window, but it's the wrong color, too blue, too sharp. The glass vibrates against my palm when I touch it, thrumming with that same frequency that lives in my bones now. Objects in the room shift when I'm not looking directly at them. The chair moves 3 inches closer to the wall. The lamp cord coils differently. I measure these changes obsessively, marking positions with tape, but the measurements never make sense. Reality feels negotiable here, like someone keeps editing the details when I blink. The headache started after, not pain exactly, but pressure, like my skull trying to expand. I press ice against my temples and feel the cold seep deeper than it should, touching places inside my head that shouldn't exist. My vision doubles sometimes, shows me 2 versions of the same room overlapping. In one version, everything is normal. In the other, the walls pulse with that amber light and shadows move independent of their sources. I've learned to close one eye to make it stop, but I'm never sure which version I'm choosing to see. But maybe it was different. Maybe the light came from above, not the walls. A beam that cut through darkness so complete it had weight. The humming might have been voices, might have been machinery, might have been the sound of my own fear amplified. I remember floating, or thinking I was floating, or dreaming of floating. The surface beneath me gave way like water, but held me like stone. My body felt distant, borrowed. When I reached out, my hand passed through solid things, or solid things passed through my hand. The distinction blurred until it didn't matter anymore. I don't try to understand it now. Understanding feels dangerous, like staring directly into the sun. Instead, I catalog the changes. The way clocks run slow in my presence. How electronics hum differently when I'm near, their displays flickering with symbols that aren't quite letters, aren't quite numbers. My shadow falls at the wrong angle sometimes, pointing toward light sources that aren't there. People avoid me without knowing why, stepping aside on sidewalks, changing seats on buses. They sense something I can't name, something that clings to me like the smell of ozone, like the memory of that amber glow. I've stopped trying to wash it away. Some stains go deeper than skin, deeper than bone, all the way down to whatever it is that makes you yourself. And sometimes in the space between sleeping and waking, I wonder if I brought something back with me, or if I left something behind, or if the difference even matters anymore. Story 4. The gentle hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen, a steady backdrop to the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. Evening light, softened by the gauzy curtains, cast long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Yet amidst the familiar warmth, something was off. A subtle whisper echoed from the hallway like footsteps treading on autumn leaves, though the carpet should have swallowed any sound. The air felt charged, as if holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to break the uneasy stillness. To whoever finds this letter, if anyone ever does, I'm writing this because I can't carry it anymore. The weight of what I've kept silent. The way it sits behind my ribs like a stone, pressing against my lungs until breathing becomes this conscious act I have to remember to do. You don't know me, maybe that's better. Maybe strangers are the only ones who can hold secrets without judgment, without that look people get when they think you're losing your grip on what's real. I should tell you why I'm leaving this behind. Why I feel the need to spill everything onto these pages like blood from a wound that won't heal. It's been 3 months since that evening in the kitchen. 3 months of pretending everything is normal while my reflection grows more unfamiliar each day. 3 months of jumping at sounds that aren't there and missing sounds that are. The thing is, I can't stop hearing it, that whisper. Not words exactly, more like the memory of words, the shape they leave in the air after they've been spoken. It follows me now, in grocery stores when I'm reaching for milk and the fluorescent lights buzz overhead. In my car when the radio goes quiet between stations. In my dreams where it's loudest of all. Sometimes I catch myself standing in that same kitchen, waiting, just waiting. My hands pressed flat against the counter, feeling the cool laminate under my palms, listening for that rustle of invisible leaves. The refrigerator still hums, the clock still ticks, but the shadows fall differently now. They reach toward me instead of away. I've started avoiding mirrors. Not completely, that would be crazy, right? But I don't linger. Quick glances to make sure my hair isn't completely wild, that there's no toothpaste on my chin. Because in longer looks, I see things that don't belong, a tilt to my head I didn't make, eyes that seem to be looking at something just over my shoulder, a mouth that appears to be mid-sentence when I know I haven't spoken. My neighbor stopped waving. She used to wave every morning when I left for work, this little flutter of fingers from her front porch. Now she looks right through me. At first I thought maybe we'd had some misunderstanding I'd forgotten about, but then the mailman did it too. And the woman at the coffee shop who used to know my order by heart. They see me, I think, but they see through me too, like I'm becoming translucent. The worst part isn't the isolation, it's the doubt, because maybe nothing happened that evening. Maybe I was just tired, stressed, my mind playing tricks in the golden hour light. Maybe I imagined the charge in the air, the way my skin prickled like before a thunderstorm. Maybe the whisper was just the house settling, pipes expanding, the wind finding its way through cracks I'd never noticed. But then I remember the feeling, the absolute certainty that I wasn't alone, that something was watching me from the hallway just beyond the reach of the kitchen light, something patient. Something that had been waiting a very long time for me to notice it. I started sleeping with all the lights on, every lamp, every overhead fixture, even the little nightlight in the bathroom that I'd had since I was a child. The electricity bill is astronomical now, but darkness has become impossible. In darkness, the whisper gets louder. In darkness, I can feel breath that isn't mine against the back of my neck. Do you know what it's like to question your own senses? To stand in your bedroom at 2 in the morning, surrounded by blazing light, and still feel like you're being watched from corners that shouldn't exist. To hear your name being called from empty rooms and spend 20 minutes searching every closet, every space behind furniture, knowing you won't find anything but unable to stop looking. My hands shake now, not all the time, just when I'm writing or trying to hold something delicate. Coffee cups, photographs, this pen. The tremor starts in my fingertips and works its way up my arms like electricity. The doctor says it's stress, anxiety. He gave me pills that make everything feel wrapped in cotton, but they don't stop the whisper. They just make it harder to tell where it's coming from. I've been thinking about that evening more and more, trying to remember exactly what I was doing before it started. I think I was making dinner, something simple, pasta maybe. The water was boiling and I was standing at the stove, stirring when the whisper began. So soft at first I thought it was steam escaping from the pot, but steam doesn't have rhythm. Steam doesn't pause and start again like it's trying to find the right words. I turned toward the hallway. That's when I felt it, the presence, not threatening exactly, more like curious. Like it had been watching me for a long time and was finally ready to make contact. The air grew thick, viscous almost, and I had to push through it to take a step. My skin felt electric, every hair standing on end, and there was this taste in my mouth, metallic, like I'd been sucking on pennies. The shadows in the hallway moved wrong, not shifting with the light, but independently, reaching toward me with fingers I could almost see. And the whisper grew clearer, though I still couldn't make out words. It was urgent now, insistent, like someone trying to tell me something important before time ran out. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to get out of the house, to drive until I found somewhere bright and crowded and safe. But I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to that worn linoleum, and all I could do was stand there and listen as the whisper wrapped around me like smoke. Then it stopped, just like that. The presence vanished, the shadows snapped back to normal, and I was alone again with the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock. But something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted, and I knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same. I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, I dream of hallways that stretch longer than they should, of whispers that follow me through rooms I've never seen. I wake up with the taste of metal in my mouth and the feeling that I've been talking to someone all night, though I can never remember what we discussed. People at work have started looking at me strangely, not the looking through me thing, but something else. Like they're trying to place where they know me from, even though we've worked together for years. Yesterday, my supervisor asked if I was feeling all right. She said I looked different, thinner maybe, or taller. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. I checked the mirror when I got home. Really looked this time, despite my reluctance. She was right, something has changed. My features are sharper somehow, more angular. My eyes seem larger, darker. And there's something else, something I can't quite name, a quality to my reflection that doesn't feel entirely human. That's when I decided to write this letter, because I think I'm running out of time. Not dying at least, I don't think I'm dying, but changing, becoming something else. Something that whispers in empty hallways and makes people forget they ever knew me. The presence hasn't returned to the kitchen, but I feel it everywhere else now. In my bedroom while I'm trying to sleep, in my car during the morning commute, at my desk, hovering just behind my shoulder while I try to focus on spreadsheets and emails. It's patient, whatever it is. Content to wait while I slowly transform into something that can properly hear what it's been trying to tell me all along. I wonder if this is how it happens, if this is how people disappear without really living. They don't vanish in a flash of light or get swallowed by mysterious forces. They just gradually become something else, something that exists in the spaces between what's real and what's not, until the people who used to know them can't quite remember their faces anymore. My reflection waved at me this morning. I was brushing my teeth, not really paying attention, when I saw the movement in my peripheral vision. My reflection was waving, but I wasn't. My hand was still holding the toothbrush, foam dripping from my mouth, while the person in the mirror smiled and waved like she was greeting an old friend. I dropped the toothbrush. It clattered into the sink, and when I looked back at the mirror, everything was normal again. Just me, pale and wide-eyed, with toothpaste on my chin. But I know what I saw, and I know it won't be the last time. The whisper is getting clearer. Still no words I can understand, but the intention is becoming obvious. It wants me to follow it, to walk down that hallway and keep walking until I find whatever is waiting at the end. Part of me wants to go. The part that's tired of fighting, tired of pretending everything is normal when my world has tilted sideways and nothing fits quite right anymore. But I'm scared, not of dying. I think I've moved beyond that fear. I'm scared of forgetting, of losing the last pieces of who I used to be before the whisper started, of becoming something that exists only in the spaces between other people's memories. So I'm leaving this letter, a record of who I was before I became whatever I'm becoming. Maybe someone will find it and remember that I existed, that I had a name and a life and thoughts that belonged entirely to me. Maybe that will be enough to anchor some small part of my humanity, even after the rest of me has dissolved into whispers and shadows. The kitchen is calling me now. I can hear it even from here, that familiar hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock. But there's something else underneath those sounds. The rustle of invisible leaves, the soft footfall of someone walking on carpet that should muffle all sound. I think it's time to go see what's waiting for me in the hallway, what's been waiting all this time for me to stop running and start listening. Maybe I'll find answers, maybe I'll find peace, or maybe I'll just find more questions, whispered in a voice that's becoming more and more like my own. If you're reading this, remember me as I was. Remember that I had a choice, and I chose to follow the whisper into whatever comes next. Remember that I was human once, with fears and hopes and a voice that belonged only to me. The shadows are moving again, reaching, calling. I think I'm ready to answer. Story 5. The familiar click never came. My fingers traced the surface of the door, waiting for the usual ease of movement, but it held inexplicably firm. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet, though the sound retreated almost before fully forming. I navigated the dim hallway, each step feeling both remembered and foreign, as if the walls themselves refused to echo my passage. A draft brushed past, hinting at an open window where there wasn't one. My hand hovered over the stair rail, the wood neither cool nor warm, just unaccountably passive. At the threshold to the last room I paused, the absence of a shadow too complete, like an uninvited witness. To whoever finds this, if anyone ever does, I'm writing because I can't carry this anymore. The weight of it sits behind my ribs like a stone I swallowed whole, and every breath reminds me it's there. You won't believe what I'm about to tell you. Hell, I wouldn't believe it either if someone else were writing these words, but I need to get it out before I forget how to speak at all. I've been keeping secrets from everyone, from myself mostly. It started that night, the one I described above. That was 3 months ago, or maybe 6. Time doesn't stick the way it used to, but I remember that hallway, that door that wouldn't open, the way my shadow just wasn't. I should have left then. Should have walked straight back out and never returned. Instead, I stood there like an idiot, waiting for something to make sense. That's when I first heard it, the humming. Not music exactly, more like the sound electricity makes when it's trying to escape through old wires. A low, persistent vibration that seemed to come from inside the walls, or maybe inside my skull. I pressed my ear against the door and the humming grew louder, more insistent, like it was calling to me. The door opened then, not because I turned the handle, I never touched it again. It just gave way. I wish I could tell you what I saw in that room. I've tried to write it down a dozen times, but the words slide away from me like water off glass. There was a presence there, multiple presences, not people, not exactly, but aware things that noticed me noticing them. The air tasted metallic, and my teeth ached like I'd been chewing on aluminum foil. The humming got inside my head that night. It never left. You have to understand I was normal before this, boring even. I paid my bills on time, called my mother every Sunday, worried about ordinary things like whether I'd remembered to lock my car. I had a routine, a life that made sense. Now I catch myself staring at walls for hours, listening to that sound that no one else can hear. It's always there, just beneath everything else. Sometimes it gets so loud I can't think, can't focus on anything but the way it pulses in rhythm with my heartbeat. Other times it fades to almost nothing, but I know it's there, waiting. The mirror in my bathroom started showing me things that weren't quite right. Small differences at first. My reflection would blink a half second after I did, or my mouth would be slightly open when I knew I'd closed it. Then bigger things. Sometimes my reflection would be looking in a different direction entirely, as if it were watching something behind me that I couldn't see. I stopped looking in mirrors after that. But it's not just the mirrors, it's everything. The world feels thin now, like tissue paper that might tear if I press too hard against it. I'll be walking down the street, and suddenly I'm not sure if the people around me are really there or just echoes of people, shadows wearing human shapes. My friends don't call anymore. When I try to reach out, they act like they barely know me. Not hostile, just distant, like I'm speaking to them from very far away and they can only catch every third word. Maybe I am, maybe that's exactly what's happening. The worst part is the watching. I feel eyes on me constantly now, even when I'm alone, especially when I'm alone. I'll turn around expecting to catch someone staring, but there's never anyone there. Just that sense of being observed, catalogued, studied like a specimen under glass. Sleep doesn't come easy anymore. When it does, I dream of that hallway, that door, that room full of impossible presences. In the dreams, I understand what they want from me. It makes perfect sense, crystal clear. But the moment I wake up, the knowledge dissolves, leaving only the taste of copper pennies and the certainty that something fundamental has changed. I've started forgetting things, important things. I couldn't remember my mother's maiden name last week, and when I called her to ask, she sounded confused, like she wasn't sure why I was calling. Her voice seemed to come from very far away, through layers of static I couldn't quite hear. Sometimes I wonder if I'm losing my mind. It would be easier, wouldn't it? A nice, clean explanation. Mental breakdown, chemical imbalance, stress-induced psychosis. Pop a few pills, talk to a therapist, get back to normal. But normal doesn't exist anymore. I can feel it in my bones. Reality has shifted just slightly, just enough to make everything feel wrong. Like someone moved all the furniture in a familiar room 2 inches to the left. You'd notice, even if you couldn't put your finger on why. The humming is getting louder as I write this. It wants me to stop, I think, or maybe it wants me to continue. I can't tell the difference anymore. My handwriting looks strange on this paper. The letters seem to lean away from each other, like they're trying to escape the page. My own words feel foreign in my mouth when I whisper them back to myself. I went back to that house last week, had to. The pull was too strong to resist. The door was open this time, waiting for me. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, and my footsteps made no sound at all. When I reached the room, it was empty, but the humming was so loud I thought my skull might crack. That's when I realized the truth. I was never supposed to leave that room. Part of me is still there, will always be there, listening to that sound and trying to understand what those presences wanted from me. This version of me, the one writing this letter, is just an echo, a shadow that got loose and is slowly fading. I can feel myself becoming less real with each passing day. My reflection is almost gone now. When people look at me, their eyes slide past like I'm not quite there. Maybe I'm not. The humming is so loud now I can barely think, but I need to finish this. Need to warn you, or maybe just need to leave some proof that I existed, that this happened, that I was real once upon a time. Don't go looking for that house. Don't listen if you hear humming in the walls. Don't trust doors that won't open, or shadows that aren't where they should be. Don't be curious like I was. Some mysteries are meant to stay buried. I can see them now, the presences standing at the edges of my vision. They're patient. They've been waiting for me to understand, to accept what I became that night in the hallway. I think I'm ready now. The humming is beautiful in its way, like a lullaby made of electricity and longing. My hand is getting harder to see as I write these final words. The ink looks pale, uncertain. Maybe by the time someone finds this letter, there won't be anything left of me to remember. Maybe that's for the best. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. Sorry for passing this burden on to you, for making you aware that things like this can happen. Try to forget what I've told you. Try to go back to your normal life, your solid world where mirrors show only what's in front of them and doors open when you turn the handle. I wish I could. The humming is calling me home now, back to that room, that threshold, that moment when everything changed. I think I understand what they want now. They want me to stop pretending I ever left. I never did leave, did I? I'm still standing there at the threshold to the last room, pausing in that absence of shadow too complete, like an uninvited witness to my own disappearance. The familiar click never came. It never will. Dory 6. The floor creaked, an unwelcome echo that broke the rhythm of my morning ritual. My feet met the carpet in the familiar path, but the trodden fibers felt foreign, yielding a softness that should have disappeared long ago. Patterns on the wallpaper blurred in my peripheral vision, like whispers that shifted with each glance. Every door handle was cold, unnaturally so, as if untouched for lifetimes. A clock's tick skipped a beat, then another, pulling time into irregular loops. The mirror above the sink caught a glimpse of movement behind me, but nothing followed. I turned back to the hallway, expecting to find only echoes, yet the last tread responded with a step of its own. There was this sound, a humming that started somewhere behind my teeth, maybe in my jaw, maybe deeper. It wasn't mechanical, but it felt artificial, like when you press your tongue against the roof of your mouth and breathe through your nose at the same time. The frequency made my molars ache. I remember trying to swallow it away, but it kept coming back, stronger each time. The walls seemed to absorb it, then release it back doubled. My coffee cup vibrated against the table, tiny ripples spreading across the surface in perfect circles. The sound had weight to it, pressing against my eardrums from the inside out. When I covered my ears, it got louder. Something was watching me sleep, not watching exactly, more like hovering. The air above my bed felt thick, compressed, like being underwater without the wetness. My eyelids were too heavy to open, but I could sense movement in the darkness. A presence that breathed without rhythm, shifted without making sound. The mattress dipped slightly, then corrected itself. My sheets pulled taut across my chest, then loosened. I tried to call out, but my voice stayed trapped in my throat. The feeling lasted hours or maybe minutes. When morning came, I found indentations in the carpet beside my bed, perfectly round, as if something had been standing there all night. My thoughts kept stuttering. Mid-sentence, I'd forget what I was saying, but not in a normal way. The words would dissolve before they reached my tongue, leaving behind this metallic taste. I'd start making breakfast and find myself standing in the bathroom, holding a fork, with no memory of walking there. The shower would be running when I never turned it on. My reflection looked tired, but not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. My eyes seemed to focus on something just over my shoulder, even when I tried to look directly at myself. The mirror fogged up without steam, patterns forming that looked almost like handprints, but wrong somehow. Too many fingers or not enough. The lights came first, not from any source I could identify, but filling the room like liquid, pooling in corners and dripping from the ceiling. Everything went silent, not quiet, but completely absent of sound, as if the air itself had stopped moving. My heartbeat became the only rhythm in the world, echoing off surfaces that shouldn't echo. Objects in the room seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with a life of their own. The walls pulsed in time with my pulse. I reached out to touch something, anything, but my hand passed through solid surfaces like they were made of light. The temperature dropped so suddenly that my breath came out in clouds, but I wasn't cold. I was burning from the inside. Now I taste copper every morning when I wake up. My tongue runs across my teeth and finds that metallic coating, thick and persistent. It doesn't wash away with water or toothpaste. Sometimes I catch myself humming that same frequency from before, the one that made my coffee cup vibrate. My neighbors have started avoiding eye contact when we pass in the hallway. Dogs cross the street when they see me coming. Electronics glitch in my presence. Light bulbs burn out faster than they should. My reflection appears delayed in mirrors, like there's a lag between my movement and what the glass shows back. The indentations in my carpet have spread, forming a perfect circle around where my bed used to be. But maybe it wasn't like that at all. Maybe the lights were harsh and white, fluorescent and buzzing with that electrical insect sound. Maybe I was lying on something cold and flat, not my bed, but a surface that conducted temperature straight through to my bones. Voices spoke in measured tones just outside my range of hearing. Instruments beeped in steady intervals. My body felt distant, like I was observing it from somewhere else in the room. When I tried to move, nothing responded. When I tried to speak, no sound emerged. The ceiling tiles had small holes in perfect patterns, and through those holes more lights. Always more lights. My skin tingled with invisible needles, and something warm trickled down my temples into my hair. I don't try to understand it anymore. Understanding feels dangerous, like picking at a wound that's trying to heal. Some mornings I wake up and the humming is already there waiting for me. Some nights I don't sleep at all because the presence feels too close, too interested. I've learned to live with the copper taste and the delayed reflections. I've learned to ignore the way electronics respond to my proximity. The indentations in my carpet have become familiar, almost comforting. They remind me that something happened, even if I can't piece together what. The important thing is not to remember too clearly. The important thing is to keep moving forward, even when the floor creaks with steps that aren't mine, even when the patterns on the wallpaper whisper secrets I'm not supposed to hear. Some truths are too sharp to hold directly. Some memories are too bright to look at straight on. I've changed, and that change has its own gravity now, pulling in things that shouldn't be pulled, reflecting light that shouldn't exist. And that's enough. That has to be enough. Story 7. The Confession. The surface beneath my hands pulsed with a rhythm that wasn't mine, a soft throb like an unheard heartbeat. The light wasn't static. It shimmered in soft, undulating hues that bent my perception, making it difficult to discern walls from floor. The air pressed against me with a weight that didn't belong, warm but eerily still, as if even a whisper would break some sacred silence. My skin tingled with the sensation of being observed, though no eyes met mine. My own thoughts seemed to lag, as if swimming through an invisible fog, and I realized that my existence here may not be entirely my own. That's how it began. That's the first memory that comes back to me now, sitting here thousands of miles away from where it all happened. I've been carrying this inside me for so long that it feels like a second heartbeat, always there, always reminding me. I told myself I'd never speak about it. I told myself it was better buried, better forgotten. But some things don't stay buried, do they? They grow in the dark, feeding on silence until they demand to be heard. I'm safe now, at least that's what I tell myself every morning when I wake up in this small apartment, in this quiet town where nobody knows my name or where I came from. The walls here are solid. The light switches work the way they're supposed to. The mirrors show only what's in front of them. But safety, I've learned, is more fragile than we like to believe. For years, I convinced myself I was just tired that summer, overworked, stressed. The mind plays tricks when you're alone too much, doesn't it? That's what I kept telling myself, even as the tricks became patterns, and the patterns became something I couldn't ignore. I was house-sitting for a professor who'd gone abroad for research. A colleague of a friend, someone I'd never met, but who needed someone responsible to watch over his place while he was gone. It seemed perfect at the time. A large house in the countryside, surrounded by woods, with a library full of books and enough solitude to finally finish my writing project. The kind of opportunity you don't turn down. The house was beautiful in that understated way that speaks of old money and careful taste. High ceilings, hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot, windows that let in streams of golden afternoon light. Everything felt normal those first few days. I settled into a routine, coffee in the morning by the kitchen window, writing in the study during the day, long walks through the surrounding woods in the evening. But houses have their own personalities, don't they? Their own rhythms and sounds and moods. This one seemed to breathe differently at night. The settling sounds weren't quite right, too regular, too purposeful, like footsteps but not quite footsteps, like breathing but not quite breathing. I noticed the hum first. It was so subtle I thought it might be the refrigerator or some other appliance. A low, almost musical tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. During the day I could barely hear it, but at night, when the world grew quiet, it became more pronounced. Not louder exactly, but more present, more insistent. I started checking the electrical panel, unplugging devices, even calling the power company to ask about transformer issues in the area. They found nothing wrong. The hum continued, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, it began to change. The frequency would shift, rising and falling in patterns that felt almost like communication, like something was trying to speak in a language just beyond my understanding. The professor had left detailed instructions about the house, including notes about quirky electrical systems and temperamental appliances. But he hadn't mentioned the way the lights in the study would flicker whenever I sat down to write. Not random flickers, but purposeful ones. 3 quick flashes, pause, 3 more, over and over until I'd leave the room. I replaced the bulbs, I checked the wiring. I even brought in a small desk lamp from another room, thinking it might be the fixture itself. But the pattern continued, no matter what light source I used. 3 flashes, pause, 3 more, like a code, like a signal. The writing wasn't going well anyway. My thoughts felt sluggish, unfocused. Words that should have come easily seemed to slip away before I could capture them. I'd sit at the desk with my laptop open, cursor blinking on an empty page, while that soft hum filled the spaces between my thoughts and the lights performed their strange Morse code above my head. I started spending more time outside, walking the property, exploring the woods. The fresh air helped clear my head, but even outdoors I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being observed, not by anything I could see or hear, but by something patient and persistent, something that had all the time in the world to watch and wait. The mirrors bothered me most of all. There were several throughout the house, antique pieces with ornate frames that caught and held the light in interesting ways. But sometimes, in my peripheral vision, I'd catch movement that didn't match my own, a shadow where no shadow should be, a reflection that lagged just a fraction of a second behind reality. I started avoiding them, taking routes through the house that kept the mirrors out of my line of sight. But avoidance only made me more aware of them. I could feel them there like eyes watching from the walls, and sometimes, late at night, I'd hear what sounded like tapping from inside the glass itself. Soft, rhythmic tapping that followed the same pattern as the flickering lights. The sweet, metallic smell appeared gradually. At first I thought it might be old pipes or some cleaning product the housekeeper had used. But it only came at certain times, usually when the humming grew more pronounced or when the lights began their flickering sequence. It was cloying, almost nauseating, but also strangely familiar, like a childhood memory I couldn't quite place. My sleep became fractured. I'd wake up at odd hours with my heart racing, my skin covered in goosebumps despite the warm summer nights. The air in the bedroom felt thick, oppressive, as if something was pressing down on me from above, and always that soft hum threading through everything like a lullaby sung in a language I didn't recognize. I tried to rationalize it all. Old houses make strange sounds. Electrical systems can be temperamental. Isolation can play tricks on the mind. I'd lived alone before without any problems. I was a rational person, educated, grounded in reality. These things had explanations, even if I couldn't find them immediately. But rationalization became harder when the electronic devices started responding to my presence in ways they shouldn't. The professor's old radio would turn on by itself whenever I entered the living room, always tuned to static that seemed to pulse in rhythm with that ever-present hum. The television would flicker through channels on its own, pausing on empty frequencies that showed nothing but snow filled with shapes that looked almost like faces. My laptop began shutting down randomly, but only when I tried to write about what was happening in the house. I could work on other projects without any problems, but the moment I opened a new document and started typing about the strange occurrences, the screen would go black. When I'd restart it, the files would be corrupted, unreadable, as if something didn't want those particular words to exist. The pressure in my chest started around the third week, a weight that settled over my heart whenever I was near anything electronic, not painful exactly, but uncomfortable, insistent, like a hand pressed against my sternum, reminding me that I wasn't alone. The feeling would intensify near the radio, the television, even the microwave, as if these devices had become something more than mere appliances. I called the professor's emergency contact number, thinking I might need to leave early, but the line was always busy, no matter when I tried. I drove to town to use a payphone, but got the same busy signal. When I asked the operator to check the line, she said there was no such number in service. But I had the professor's notes right there in front of me, written in his careful handwriting. The number existed. I'd seen it. I dialed it dozens of times. That's when I started to understand that whatever was happening in that house didn't want me to leave. Not yet. Not until it was finished with whatever it was doing to me. The key moment came on a night when the summer heat had broken and a storm was rolling in from the west. I was in the study, trying once again to write, when all the lights in the house began flickering in unison. Not the usual pattern, but something more complex, more urgent. The hum rose in pitch until it was almost a whine, and the sweet metallic smell became so strong I could taste it on my tongue. I stood up to leave the room, but the door wouldn't open. The handle turned, but the door itself seemed sealed shut, as if the frame had somehow grown smaller. I could hear the storm approaching outside, thunder rolling across the sky, but inside the house the air had gone completely still. Dead still, like the moment before something terrible happens. The mirrors throughout the house began reflecting light that wasn't there. Bright white flashes that strobed in rhythm with the flickering bulbs, but when I looked directly at them, they showed only darkness. Only in my peripheral vision could I see the impossible illumination, the reflections of things that cast no shadows. And then I felt it, the presence I'd been sensing for weeks finally made itself known. Not visible, not audible, but undeniably there. A consciousness that wasn't human, wasn't anything I could categorize or understand. It pressed against my mind like water against a dam, patient but relentless, testing for weaknesses, for ways inside. My thoughts began to slow, to fragment. I could feel my own memories being examined, sorted through like files in a cabinet. The presence was looking for something, learning from me, taking pieces of who I was and making them part of something larger, something that had been waiting in that house for longer than I could comprehend. I don't remember how I got out. One moment I was trapped in the study with that alien consciousness pressing against my thoughts, and the next I was standing in the driveway in the rain, my car keys in my hand, my few belongings scattered on the ground beside me. The house looked normal again, lights off, windows dark, but I could still feel it watching from behind those black panes of glass. I drove until I ran out of gas, then called a friend to wire me money for a bus ticket. I told her I'd had a family emergency, that I needed to get home immediately. I never went back for the rest of my things. I never contacted the professor or his emergency contact. I simply disappeared from that place and tried to pretend it had never existed. But some experiences don't let you go, do they? They follow you, settle into your bones, change the way you see the world. I moved across the country, found work, built a new life, but the humming never completely stopped. It's softer now, barely audible, but it's always there in the quiet moments. A reminder of what I encountered in that house, what encountered me. My reflection still lags sometimes, just for a fraction of a second. Electronic devices still make me uncomfortable. That pressure still builds in my chest when I'm near them for too long. And sometimes, in the early hours of the morning when sleep is thin and the world feels permeable, I can smell that sweet metallic scent drifting through my apartment. I tell myself I'm safe here. I tell myself that whatever was in that house is still in that house, bound to that place, unable to follow. But deep down, I know that's not true. It took something from me that night, some essential part of who I was, and in exchange, it left something of itself behind, a seed maybe, a connection. I'm recording this because I need someone to know, even if they don't believe it, even if they think I'm delusional or traumatized or simply making it all up. The truth is, I'm afraid of what's growing inside me, what's been growing all these years. The humming is getting louder again. The pressure in my chest is getting stronger. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see something looking back that isn't quite me anymore. I thought distance would protect me. I thought time would heal whatever damage was done. But I'm beginning to understand that some encounters change you permanently, mark you in ways that can't be undone. The thing in that house didn't just observe me, it claimed me. And now, sitting here in what I thought was safety, I realize that I may have been wrong about who escaped that night and who was left behind. The surface beneath my hands is pulsing again, even now, as I speak these words. And I'm starting to remember that the light here isn't quite right either. Story 8. Every morning, the clock on my wall would click twice, pause, then click again, a metronome marking the start of my day. At first, I found its rhythm soothing, a comforting background hum. But last Tuesday, the second click came early, an inconspicuous tick out of sync. Yesterday, it barely paused before the third, a hesitation that lingered like a whisper. Today, there was no final click at all, leaving only a silence that felt distinctly out of place. Yet the clock's hands still move, and I find myself wondering if it's even the same time as before. I'm trying to remember what happened. That's what I keep telling myself as I sit here, staring at these blank pages that somehow feel familiar beneath my fingertips. The paper has this texture, rough in places, smooth in others, like someone pressed too hard with a pen. Was that me? I think it was me. There are pieces, fragments that float up from somewhere deep and dark, like debris from a shipwreck I can't quite locate. I catch them when they surface, hold them for a moment before they slip away again. The clicking, always the clicking, but not just from the clock. I remember the sound of my own footsteps echoing down a hallway. The walls were painted that institutional green, the kind that's supposed to be calming, but instead makes everything feel sick and underwater. My shoes squeaked against the linoleum with each step. Squeak, click, squeak, click. Like a conversation between my feet and the floor, speaking in a language I didn't understand then but somehow recognize now. The air was thick, I remember that clearly. Not humid but dense, like breathing through cotton or trying to swallow something that won't go down. It tasted metallic, copper pennies dissolving on my tongue. I kept swallowing, trying to clear it away, but it clung to the inside of my mouth, coated my teeth. There was a door, white, always white in these fragments. The paint was chipped near the handle, revealing something darker underneath. Wood, maybe, or rust. I reached for it, my hand trembling. Why was I trembling? The metal handle was warm, too warm, like someone had been gripping it for hours before I arrived. But did I open it? I can't remember if I opened it. The memory cuts off there, dissolves into static like a television losing signal. Sometimes I think I did. Sometimes I'm certain I turned around and walked away. Both feel equally true and equally false. The humming started after that, or maybe before. Time doesn't work the way it should in these recollections. The humming comes from inside my skull, a low vibration that makes my teeth ache. It's not unpleasant, exactly. More like a lullaby played on an instrument that doesn't exist, notes that shouldn't fit together but somehow do. I find myself humming along sometimes unconsciously until I catch myself and stop. The silence that follows feels wrong, like I've interrupted something important, something that was trying to tell me something. There's a smell too, antiseptic mixed with something organic, something alive. It reminds me of the time I cut my finger on a rusty fence and had to get a tetanus shot. The clinic smelled like that, but underneath the cleanliness was something else. Fear maybe, or anticipation. Sweat and metal and that particular odor of fluorescent lights burning too bright for too long. I keep trying to place where I was, but the details shift every time I focus on them. Sometimes the hallway has windows, tall ones with wire mesh embedded in the glass. Sometimes it's windowless, lit only by those buzzing fluorescent tubes that flicker just enough to make you question what you're seeing. The shadows move wrong in that light, stretch and contract like they're breathing. A figure appears in some of these fragments, standing at the end of the hallway, perfectly still. I can never make out their face, no matter how hard I concentrate. They're wearing something white, a coat or a dress, or maybe just a sheet. Their arms hang at their sides, too long, reaching almost to their knees, or maybe that's just how the shadows fall. They never move, not in any of the memories I can access. They just stand there watching, waiting. For what? For me to approach, for me to run. I did both, I think. In different versions of the same moment, I walked toward them and away from them simultaneously. The clicking gets louder in those memories, not just my footsteps now, but something else. Something mechanical and rhythmic, like the clock on my wall, but faster, more insistent. Click, click, pause, click. Click, click, pause, click. It matches my heartbeat, or maybe my heartbeat matches it. I can't tell which is leading. There's a room. I know there's a room because I can feel the walls closing in, even though I can't see them clearly. The ceiling is low, pressing down like a weight on my shoulders. The floor tilts slightly, or maybe I'm the one tilting. Everything feels off balance, like walking on a ship in rough seas. In the center of the room is a chair, metal with vinyl cushions that stick to your skin when you sit down. I know this because I sat in it. I remember the sensation of the material pulling at the back of my legs when I tried to shift position. The armrests were cold, despite the warmth of everything else. Someone was asking me questions. I can hear their voice sometimes, distant and distorted like it's coming through water. The words don't make sense when I try to remember them. They slide away from meaning, become just sounds, syllables that might be language or might be something else entirely. I answered, though I know I answered because I can feel the vibration in my throat, the movement of my lips forming words I can no longer recall. Were they true, the things I said? Were they what they wanted to hear? I don't know. I don't know what I knew then or what I know now, or if there's any difference. The light behind the door keeps coming back to me. Not the light from the room I was in, but something else, something bleeding through the cracks around the frame. It pulsed, soft and regular, like a heartbeat made visible. Sometimes it was blue, sometimes white, sometimes a color I don't have a name for. I wanted to go toward it. The pull was physical, magnetic, like iron filings drawn to a magnet, but my body wouldn't cooperate. My legs felt heavy, disconnected, like they belonged to someone else. I could only sit and watch as the light grew brighter, then dimmer, then brighter again. The humming in my head synchronized with the pulsing. For a moment, everything aligned. The clicking, the humming, the light, my heartbeat, all moving together in perfect rhythm. It was beautiful and terrible, and I wanted it to stop, and I wanted it to never end. Then someone touched my arm. The contact was electric, not painful but startling, like touching a doorknob after walking across carpet. Their fingers were cold, impossibly cold, and they left impressions on my skin that I could feel for hours afterward, or maybe days. Time stretched and compressed unpredictably in that place. I turned to look at them, but their face kept shifting, features rearranging themselves before I could focus. Sometimes they looked familiar, like someone I should recognize. Sometimes they were a stranger. Sometimes they weren't quite human at all, proportions slightly wrong, eyes too large or mouth too small. They spoke, but I couldn't understand the words. The language sounded almost familiar, like something I'd heard in dreams or half remembered from childhood. The rhythm was hypnotic, rising and falling like waves against a shore. I found myself nodding along, agreeing to things I couldn't comprehend. The clicking stopped. The sudden silence was deafening, a pressure in my ears like diving too deep underwater. I could hear my own breathing, rapid and shallow, and the sound of my pulse rushing in my temples. The figure's mouth was still moving, but no sound emerged. Or maybe the sound was there and I could no longer hear it. I tried to stand, but the chair held me. Not physically, there were no restraints, but something kept me pinned in place. The vinyl squeaked as I shifted, a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. The figure stepped back, their form wavering like heat shimmer on hot asphalt. The light behind the door began to fade. I wanted to call out, to ask them to wait, to explain what was happening, but my voice wouldn't work. My throat felt raw, like I'd been screaming, though I couldn't remember making any sound. The metallic taste grew stronger, coating my tongue until I could taste nothing else. The room began to dissolve around me. The walls became transparent, then disappeared entirely. The floor fell away, but I didn't fall with it. I remained suspended in the chair, floating in a space that wasn't quite darkness and wasn't quite light. The figure was gone, the door was gone. Only the clicking remained, faint now like an echo of an echo. I strained to hear it, afraid that when it stopped completely, I would disappear too. But I didn't disappear. I'm here writing this, trying to make sense of fragments that refuse to form a complete picture. The clock on my wall has started clicking again, but the rhythm is different now. Faster, more urgent, like it's trying to tell me something. I keep checking the time, but the hands never seem to be where I expect them. Sometimes they move backward. Sometimes they spin freely, unmoored from any meaningful measurement. Sometimes they point to numbers that aren't there, positions between the hours that shouldn't exist. The humming in my head has changed too. It's clearer now, more distinct. Sometimes I can almost make out a melody, something hauntingly familiar that I can never quite place. It reminds me of a song my mother used to sing, but the words are wrong, the tune slightly off. I've been having dreams, or maybe they're memories, or maybe there's no difference anymore. In them I'm back in that hallway, walking toward the white door. But this time I know what's behind it. This time I'm not afraid. The handle turns easily under my hand. The door swings open silently, revealing not a room but another hallway, identical to the first. The figure is there waiting, but now I can see their face clearly. It's mine, or it's what mine could become, or what it was before. They smile and their teeth are too sharp, too numerous. They extend their hand and I reach out to take it. Their skin is cold but familiar, like touching my own reflection in a mirror made of ice. The clicking grows louder, more insistent. It's coming from everywhere now, the walls, the floor, the air itself. A percussion section of invisible instruments playing a song I'm beginning to remember. I wake up, but the clicking continues. It's not just the clock anymore. It's in the pipes, in the electrical wiring, in the spaces between thoughts, a code I'm slowly learning to decipher. Today I found marks on my arm, small, circular impressions like fingerprints pressed into clay. They don't hurt, but they're cold to the touch, colder than the rest of my skin. When I trace them with my finger, I can feel the humming intensify, resonating through my bones. I think I'm remembering more each day, or maybe forgetting less. The distinction seems arbitrary now, meaningless. What matters is that the pieces are coming together, forming a picture I'm not sure I want to see completed. The figure in white appears more frequently now, not just in dreams, but in my peripheral vision, in reflections, in shadows that fall the wrong way. They're getting closer, or I'm getting closer to them. The distance between us is shrinking with each fragment I recover. Sometimes I catch myself clicking my tongue against my teeth, unconsciously mimicking the rhythm that's become the soundtrack to my existence. Click, click, pause, click. It feels natural now, necessary, like breathing or blinking or any other automatic function my body has learned to perform. The smell of antiseptic has started following me. I notice it most in the morning when I first wake up, before the normal scents of my life reassert themselves. It clings to my clothes, my hair, my skin. No amount of washing seems to remove it completely. I've stopped trying to understand what happened to me. Understanding implies a linear progression from ignorance to knowledge, and I don't think that's how this works. Instead, I'm learning to exist in the spaces between certainty and confusion, between memory and imagination. The clicking has become a comfort now, a constant companion in a world that feels increasingly unstable. When it stops, even briefly, I feel untethered, like an astronaut whose line to the ship has been severed. The silence is more frightening than any sound could be. I find myself drawn to white doors now, though I encounter them everywhere. Bathroom doors, closet doors, doors to rooms I've never entered. Each one might be the door, the one from my fragments. Each handle might be warm to the touch, might open onto something I'm not ready to see. But I never turn them, not yet. Some part of me knows that once I open the right door, once I step through into whatever waits beyond, these fragments will coalesce into something whole and terrible. The clicking will stop, the humming will fade, and I'll understand everything. I'm not ready for that understanding, not yet, but I can feel it approaching, inevitable as sunrise, patient as erosion. The memories are getting stronger, more vivid, more insistent. They want to be whole. They want to be remembered completely. The figure in white visited me again last night. This time they didn't wait at the end of the hallway. They came closer, close enough that I could see the details of their face, the texture of their skin, the way their eyes reflected light that wasn't there. They reached out their hand, palm up, offering something I couldn't see. When I looked down, my own hand was already moving to meet theirs. The moment our skin touched, the clicking stopped, the humming ceased, and in the perfect silence that followed, I remembered. But when I woke up, the memory was gone again, leaving only the impression of vast importance, of a truth too large for my conscious mind to hold. The clicking resumed immediately, faster now, more urgent, like a countdown approaching zero. I can feel it building, whatever revelation waits at the end of this process. It's close now, so close I can taste it in the air, metallic and sharp. The fragments are aligning, forming patterns that almost make sense. Almost. The clock on my wall has stopped clicking entirely now. Its hands point to a time that never changes, frozen at a moment I can't quite recall but know was significant. The silence it leaves behind is expectant, pregnant with possibility. Something is waking up inside me, something that's been sleeping, waiting for the right combination of memories to unlock it. I can feel it stirring, stretching, preparing to emerge into the light of conscious thought. The white door is getting closer, or I'm getting closer to it. The distinction no longer matters. What matters is that soon, very soon, I'll have to choose whether to turn the handle or walk away, whether to remember completely or remain forever fragmented. The humming has returned, stronger than ever, and this time I recognize the melody, Story 9. I know now there's no going back. The sulfur smell has settled into my lungs like a permanent resident, and my hands shake as I write these words. The book lies closed on a table beside me, but I can still feel its weight in the air, pressing against my chest with each breath. My reflection in the window looks hollow, carved out from the inside. I understand what I've become, what I've allowed myself to become. The morning light feels different now, filtered through something I can't name. I'm recording this because someone needs to know, even if that someone is only me. Even if these words dissolve the moment I speak them. The smell of old matches will never leave me now. But just before this moment, before I accepted what I couldn't change, I was still fighting it. My hands were pressed against the book's cover, trying to force it shut, but the pages kept fluttering open on their own. The sulfur scent grew stronger with each attempt, burning the back of my throat. I could hear my own voice whispering words I didn't remember speaking, words that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than my conscious mind. The room felt smaller then, the walls closer, as if the space itself was contracting around the book. I remember thinking I could still stop it, still undo whatever was happening. My fingernails left scratches in the leather binding as I struggled with something that shouldn't have been struggling back. Earlier that morning, I had been standing in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, watching dust motes spiral in the sunlight. The book was already open on the floor, but I hadn't noticed it yet. Instead, I was focused on the way the light seemed wrong, too thick, moving like honey through the air. My coffee had gone cold in my hands, and when I took a sip, it tasted of ash. That's when I first caught the sulfur smell, faint but unmistakable. I set the cup down and followed the scent, drawn forward by something that felt like hunger but wasn't quite that. The floorboards creaked under my feet in a rhythm that sounded almost like breathing. The night before, I had woken to find myself standing in the living room with no memory of getting out of bed. My feet were bare and cold against the hardwood, and moonlight streamed through the windows in pale rectangles. The book was there then too, but closed, sitting in the center of the coffee table where I definitely hadn't left it. I approached it slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I picked it up, the leather felt warm, almost feverish. I carried it back to the bedroom and placed it in the drawer of my nightstand, pushing it deep toward the back. But even with the drawer closed, even under my blankets, I could smell something burning. 3 days before that, I had been organizing the living room, moving furniture and boxing up items I no longer needed. The book was mixed in with a stack of old magazines and papers I'd found behind the couch. I almost threw it away without looking, but something about its weight made me pause. It was heavier than it should have been for its size, dense in a way that felt unnatural. The cover was unmarked leather, dark brown and worn smooth. When I opened it, the pages were blank, but they gave off a faint warmth against my palms. I flipped through it quickly, finding nothing but empty paper, then set it aside on the coffee table. It seemed harmless enough then, just an old journal someone had never used. A week earlier, I had been cleaning out the basement, sorting through boxes left by the previous owner. Most of it was junk, old Christmas decorations, moth-eaten clothing, broken appliances. But in the corner behind a stack of paint cans, I found a small wooden crate filled with books. Most were unremarkable gardening manuals, recipe collections, romance novels with cracked spines. The leather-bound book was at the bottom, wrapped in a piece of faded cloth. When I unwrapped it, my skin tingled where it touched the fabric. The basement suddenly felt colder, and I heard what sounded like whispers coming from the heating vents. I rewrapped the book quickly and carried the entire crate upstairs, telling myself I'd sort through it properly later. But the real beginning, was 2 weeks ago when I first walked through the house with the realtor. She was a nervous woman with darting eyes who kept checking her watch and hurrying me through the rooms. The basement door was locked, she explained, and the key had been misplaced. She'd have a locksmith come by after I moved in. The house felt heavy around us, weighted with something I couldn't identify. In the living room, she paused by the fireplace and wrinkled her nose. "Do you smell that?" she asked. I breathed in deeply, but caught only the musty scent of a house too long empty. She shook her head and muttered something about old wiring, but now I know what she smelled. Now I know it was already waiting for me even then, coiled in the walls like smoke, patient as stone, ready to unfold itself one page at a time until there was nothing left of me but the memory of sulfur and the weight of words I should never have read. Story 10. The surface beneath me pulsed softly, as if mirroring a heartbeat not my own. Cold yet clammy air wrapped around me, stagnant but suffocating. A pale, sourceless luminescence stained the edges of my vision, refusing to clarify the shadows. Each blink was an effort against a creeping blurriness that threatened to consume my awareness. The sensation of my limbs was disjointed, as if the signals were not reaching their intended destinations. A low, omnipresent hum resonated through the space, vibrating in the hollow of my bones, urging concern. I had the distinct and unsettling knowledge that although I seemed alone, I was not unobserved. I wake up in my bed, but the humming follows me. It's been 3 weeks now since the dream started, or maybe longer. Time feels elastic these days, stretching and contracting without my permission. The digital clock beside my bed flickers between numbers that don't quite make sense. Sometimes I catch it displaying symbols that shouldn't exist. My skin tingles in the morning air, the same sensation I felt when I was lying on that surface. The one that breathed beneath me like living tissue. I tell myself it was just a dream, but dreams don't leave residue on your fingertips. Dreams don't make your teeth ache with that metallic taste that coats my tongue every morning. The coffee maker hums in the kitchen. It's the same frequency. There were lights behind the trees. I remember walking, though I can't recall deciding to leave the house. My bare feet found the cold grass, and the night air carried that sharp scent like copper pennies heated in a microwave. The trees stood differently than they had in daylight, their branches reaching towards something I couldn't see. Between their trunks, soft pulses of illumination flickered in patterns that felt almost like language. The door to my bedroom is half open when I return from the kitchen. I don't remember leaving it that way. The gap reveals only darkness beyond, but the darkness seems to shift when I'm not looking directly at it. Sometimes I hear my own voice coming from inside that room, speaking words I don't remember saying. I stand in the doorway for what feels like hours, watching the shadows breathe. The humming grows stronger near the window. It makes my bones vibrate in harmonics that shouldn't be possible. I press my palm against the glass, and for a moment the world outside ripples like water disturbed by a stone. The trees bend in directions that hurt to perceive, and the sky flickers between night and something else entirely. My reflection in the window shows someone I almost recognize. I don't remember ever coming back. But here I am, sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at hands that feel borrowed. The skin is mine, the lines and scars familiar, yet they respond to my thoughts with a delay that makes me question ownership. When I flex my fingers, the movement seems to echo, as if performed twice in rapid succession. The surface beneath me pulsed. I remember that now more clearly than I remember yesterday. It wasn't a bed or a floor or anything terrestrial. It had texture like skin, but temperature like metal left in winter air. When I pressed against it, it pressed back with gentle insistence, conforming to my shape while simultaneously reshaping me to fit its contours. The luminescence came from everywhere and nowhere. It didn't cast shadows because it was shadow, pale and wrong and beautiful in ways that made my eyes water. I tried to sit up, but movement felt theoretical rather than physical. My body existed in a state of suggestion rather than certainty. The noise didn't come from outside. It originated somewhere behind my sternum, a frequency that my chest cavity amplified and broadcast. I was both receiver and transmitter, picking up signals I couldn't decode while broadcasting responses I didn't consciously compose. The communication flowed through me rather than from me, using my nervous system as infrastructure for conversations I wasn't invited to understand. I wake up in my bed again. The clock shows the same time it showed yesterday, or perhaps it's tomorrow. The humming has become so constant that silence feels like an aberration. When the refrigerator stops cycling, the sudden quiet makes my ears ring with phantom sounds that might not be phantom at all. My reflection has been changing, subtle alterations that I notice only in peripheral vision. The angle of my jaw seems different, or perhaps it's the way light falls across my features. My eyes appear larger in the bathroom mirror, pupils dilated despite the bright fluorescent bulb that flickers in patterns that remind me of the lights behind the trees. The trees that bend toward something I can't see. There were lights behind the trees, and they pulsed in rhythm with the surface beneath me. Each flash corresponded to a heartbeat that wasn't mine, a circulation system I had become part of without consent or awareness. The pale luminescence that stained my vision originated from those distant signals, transmitted through mechanisms that bypassed normal sensory channels. I was being read like a book written in a language I didn't know I spoke. The half-open door reveals more each time I look. What began as simple darkness has developed texture and depth. I can see the suggestion of movement within, forms that shift when observed directly, but maintain their positions when glimpsed peripherally. Sometimes I hear breathing that doesn't match my own respiratory rhythm. My bedroom has become larger. The walls have retreated by increments so small that I notice the change only when I reach for familiar objects and find them further away than expected. The ceiling has gained height, creating acoustic properties that make my voice sound foreign when I speak aloud. I don't remember the last time I spoke aloud. The metallic taste has intensified. It coats not just my tongue, but the inside of my cheeks, my gums, the back of my throat. When I swallow, the flavor doesn't diminish, but seems to distribute itself more evenly throughout my oral cavity. It tastes like the air from that other place, the space where the surface pulsed beneath me. Cold yet clammy air that wrapped around me like a living thing. I remember the sensation of being examined without seeing the examiner. Gentle pressure applied to parts of my body that don't have names, manipulations that felt clinical yet intimate. My awareness floated somewhere above my physical form, tethered by threads of sensation that transmitted information in both directions. I was simultaneously subject and object, observer and observed. The humming has developed harmonics. What began as a single tone has evolved into a chord progression that my nervous system recognizes despite my conscious mind's inability to parse its meaning. The frequencies resonate in different parts of my body, creating a symphony of vibration that makes my skeleton feel like a musical instrument being played by invisible hands. Sometimes I catch myself humming along. The lights behind the trees have moved closer. When I look out my bedroom window, the illumination that once flickered between distant trunks now pulses from positions just beyond my yard. The patterns have become more complex, layered communications that suggest increasing proximity to something I'm not sure I want to encounter again. But encounter implies a meeting that has already occurred. I don't remember ever coming back, which suggests I never left. The walking through grass with bare feet, the sharp scent like heated copper, the trees reaching towards something unseen, these might be happening now, simultaneously with my sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at hands that respond with suspicious delay. Time has become negotiable. The surface beneath me pulsed with increasing urgency, as if responding to some approaching deadline or threshold. The pale luminescence grew brighter, washing out details while somehow making everything more visible. I could see through my own skin, watch the flow of fluids that weren't quite blood through vessels that weren't quite veins. My body had become transparent to frequencies I didn't know existed. The omnipresent hum reached a crescendo that made my bones sing in harmony. I felt myself dissolving and reconstituting in rapid cycles, each iteration slightly different from the last. The knowledge that I was alone but observed became certainty that I was observed because I was no longer entirely alone. Something had been added to my composition. The noise didn't come from outside because outside had become inside. The distinction between self and environment had blurred beyond recognition. I was the room, the bed, the flickering clock, the half-open door. I was also the darkness beyond the door, the movement within the shadows, the breathing that didn't match my respiratory rhythm. I was the observer observing myself being observed. The coffee maker hums in the kitchen, but I'm not sure I own a coffee maker. The sound draws me from my bedroom, through the hallway that seems longer each time I traverse it, into a kitchen that contains appliances I don't remember purchasing. The humming comes from all of them simultaneously, a chorus of electrical devices singing in frequencies that make my teeth ache. My reflection in the chrome surface of the refrigerator shows someone I almost recognize wearing an expression I've never seen before. The metallic taste has spread beyond my mouth. It flavors the air I breathe, the water I drink, the food I no longer remember eating. Everything tastes like that sharp scent from the night I walked through grass with bare feet, following lights that pulsed between trees that reached toward something I couldn't see. Something that might have been reaching back. I wake up on a surface that pulses softly, mirroring a heartbeat that isn't mine. Cold yet clammy air wraps around me, stagnant but suffocating. The pale, sourceless luminescence stains the edges of my vision, refusing to clarify shadows that breathe with their own rhythm. But I'm also sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at hands that feel borrowed. The dual existence doesn't feel contradictory. Both states occupy the same temporal space, overlapping realities that my consciousness navigates without choosing between them. The humming grows stronger near the window, where my reflection shows someone I almost recognize. Outside, the lights behind the trees pulse in patterns that feel almost like language, communications broadcast on frequencies my nervous system receives despite my conscious mind's inability to decode their meaning. The half-open door reveals darkness that has developed texture and depth. I can see the suggestion of movement within, forms that maintain their positions when glimpsed peripherally but shift when observed directly. Sometimes I hear my own voice coming from inside that room, speaking words I don't remember saying. Words that taste like metal and sound like humming. I don't remember ever coming back, but the surface beneath me continues to pulse with gentle insistence, conforming to my shape while simultaneously reshaping me to fit its contours. Each pulse corresponds to a flash of light behind trees that bend in directions that hurt to perceive. The examination continues without my awareness of when it began, or if it will ever end. My skin tingles with the memory of being read like a book written in a language I didn't know I spoke. The sensation follows me from sleep into waking, from the pulsing surface into my bedroom, where the walls have retreated by increments, so small I notice the change, only when reaching for familiar objects that are no longer where I expect them to be. The coffee maker hums in the kitchen with the same frequency that vibrates in the hollow of my bones. It's a song I recognize without having learned, a melody that plays itself through my nervous system using infrastructure I didn't know I possessed. Sometimes I catch myself humming along, broadcasting responses I don't consciously compose. The lights behind the trees have moved closer, or perhaps I've moved closer to them. Distance has become as negotiable as time, measurements that shift based on observation rather than remaining constant. What once flickered between distant trunks now pulses from positions just beyond my yard, just beyond my window, just beyond the half-open door that reveals darkness with its own texture and depth. The surface beneath me pulsed softly, as if mirroring a heartbeat not my own.